Kenya was hosting the president of Senegal, His Excellency Diomaye Faye. And I thought the people on the side of government would interact with him on what matters most, because they could have learned lessons. Diomaye Faye and Osman Sonko came to power last year in Senegal. Unfortunately, when they arrived in terms of the reins of power, they realized that the government of Senegal had secretly borrowed over 13 billion US dollars of the Book of Senegal. And currently, as we talk, Senegal is in a crisis that is precipitated by that illegal secret borrowing. Kenya ought to learn from Senegal that we cannot continue, and I've been speaking about this matter. It is more important than most of the things we are talking about in the public domain, because the effects are now, but they'll be more catastrophic later. Kenya continues to borrow illegally secret loans that are not included in the book of loans. When you hear me talk about Kenya is borrowing 3.5 billion every day, it does not include the money the government keeps on borrowing on securitization. They already did 7 shillings of fuel levy in terms of collecting in advance. They are now securitizing another 5. Kenya now is in the process of taking a loan using the housing levy. That the housing levy Kenyans ought to pay for the next 7 to 10 years, they want to borrow today. Meaning even the flexibility of any government that would come and they would want to abolish or lower some of these levies is being constrained. And I keep wondering why the National Treasury can come up with even those kind of documentations and not batting even their eyes. They don't seem like they're doing the wrong thing. Maybe they need to learn from countries like Senegal that you cannot continue playing PR on economic figures, because when there is a deceleration in the economy, it doesn't matter how you communicate or the PR you engage in to communicate around that. Figures will continue to manifest. And unfortunately, that is why in Kenya, when you interact with Kenyans, they say there's no money, because some of the decisions we are making also compound to the situation we are in as a country, economically speaking. So Kenya must maintain one book of debts. And I'm calling upon all our lenders, IMF, the World Bank. They have competent people in their offices. They cannot continue to fold their hands when they see things that are happening where their voice is needed. Because we cannot afford to lose our economy. And we cannot afford to lose our country, Kenya, on the economic front. But the secret loans we are taking will definitely lead to a situation that is not very palatable for our economy. And I'm requesting those who are involved, please stop securitization. Stop taking boards that are off the book, like the Talanta board. Stop securitizing and taking a board on the housing levy, on the tourism fund levy. In Kenya, when you hear anyone inamalizika na fund, I mean an institution of government, whatever name you give it, the last name is a fund. Just know that that is another way of taking a loan. When you hear about infrastructure fund, just know it is an illegal loan that is in the offing. When you hear about tourism fund, scrutinize. You will see there is a loan in the offing or already taken. When you hear about fuel levy, RMLF, again is a fund, is another illegal loan. So we have now shifted. Yes, we are over borrowing on the main book, but Kenya has also become more cleverer. We are now borrowing off the book. We are definitely borrowing the book that was used by Macky Sall in Senegal. And upon the assumption of a different government, they realized a debt that was secret and unmanageable. You cannot tell us that securitization is off the book. You can also not tell us, for example, the road I talked about in terms of Nakuru Highway. PPP is also a form of debt because they are forcing NSSF to put in some money, but also to borrow much more. Now, the question that all the people on the debt side keep on asking, when a government agency owned 100% by government takes a loan, if it is unable to pay, who pays that loan? It is the government. And therefore, all these loans are also public debts, and they ought to be accounted as such. The last thing I want to talk about, for the last 37 days, our universities have been in a situation that has stalled in terms of education. There is nothing happening in our universities because of the lecturer strikes and also the non-teaching staff strike that is ongoing. And it seems the government has totally abdicated its duty because we do not see the urgency on the side of government when it comes to handling the strike that is currently ongoing in our universities. And it is very appalling. And to make the matter worse, we have seen in the recent past that the government has now started threatening Wasu and Kudheiha. Yet what they are asking for is the government to honor what the government has already signed in the past. And we are demanding and asking. The money that the lecturers are requesting and the members of Kudheiha is 7.9 billion Kenya shillings, which is covering up for several years. And if you look at how the government has been spending money in the recent months, as it was actually released by the government itself, we have seen that the preference of releasing exchequer or money has gone into votes that are engaged in political management. That is why you see the operations and management budgets in the big offices. For only 2 years in the financial year, they had already exhausted money for the entire half of the year. So the country is very eager to fund political management and to fund political barazas like the one we've been seeing in the name of empowerment, but they cannot find 7.9 billion shillings to honor a CBA that is already in place, as signed through Wasu and Kudheiha. And therefore, we are asking the ministry concerned, the Ministry of Education, and especially the part that handles the higher learning, and also the National Treasury, please stop taking our universities into a circus. We need this money sent. We need the arrears paid to the beneficiaries so that our institutions of higher learning can go back to business as usual. And it is disappointing to see that there seems to be no urgency. No one in government is even aware, so to say, that there is a strike ongoing in our universities. It is very, very disappointing. And we need this to be resolved because the government has money. They need to drop the lethargy. They need to drop allocating money to non-priority areas because education remains an important segment of our society. In the same note, Kenyans must have noted that some of our schools actually closed earlier than anticipated in regards to JSS and higher and senior secondary. And it is basically because the government also refused and abdicated to send money for capitation to the JSS learners and to the schools in the senior secondary. And I'm wondering, what is then the priority? We seem to have our priorities upside down because what we say in public, and especially what the government says in public, they don't seem to want to honor it when it comes to where the rubber meets the road. That our schools across the country received just a small fraction of capitation. And some had to actually close earlier because they had no money to run the schools for the remaining days. it is important that we bring back education to where it belongs in Kenya. And it belongs to a higher pedestal. And it belongs to a higher priority. So that even before we engage in ostentatious political fundings, let us focus our mind into funding education and take the primacy of education with the respect, with the weight that it deserves.